In. The massive wooden doors of courtroom 7 felt overwhelming as 12-year-old Emma Martinez stood outside, gently rocking her 6-month-old sister Sophia in her arms. Her worn-out sneakers squeaked against the polished marble floor as she shifted her weight from one foot to another, trying to keep Sophia from fussing. "It's okay, pequeña," she whispered, using the Spanish endearment their mother always used. The baby's tiny fingers curled around Emma's thumb, bringing a slight smile to her worried face. The courthouse hallway buzzed with activity, lawyers rushing past with briefcases, court officers directing people, and the constant murmur of hushed conversations. Their mother, Maria, sat on a nearby bench, her hands trembling as she filled out last-minute paperwork with their court-appointed attorney, Mr. Jenkins. The dark circles under her eyes told the story of countless sleepless nights spent battling her illness. Emma noticed how her mother's normally neat handwriting now appeared shaky and uneven. "Martinez family," called the court officer, his voice echoing through the hallway. "Judge Thompson will see you now." Emma's heart began racing as she followed her mother and Mr. Jenkins into the courtroom. The room was larger than she had imagined, with high ceilings and rows of empty wooden benches. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, creating long shadows across the floor. The American flag stood proudly next to the judge's bench, its presence adding to the room's intimidating atmosphere. Judge Richard Thompson sat elevated above everyone else, his silver hair and black robes making him look like a stern grandfather. His eyes narrowed as he noticed Emma carrying Sophia, and a slight smirk appeared on his face. The expression made Emma's stomach twist into knots. "Mr. Jenkins," Judge Thompson's voice boomed across the courtroom, "I wasn't aware we were running a daycare center today." A few court staff members chuckled at his comment, making Emma's cheeks burn with embarrassment. Mr. Jenkins cleared his throat. "Your Honor, this is the Martinez family. Maria Martinez," he gestured to their mother, "and her daughters, Emma and Sophia." The judge shuffled through some papers on his desk, his reading glasses perched on the tip of his nose. "And why, may I ask, is a child carrying an infant in my courtroom?" Before Mr. Jenkins could respond, Sophia began to whimper. Emma instinctively reached into her backpack, pulling out a prepared bottle with one hand while still holding her sister securely. The judge watched with raised eyebrows as Emma professionally adjusted Sophia in her arms and began feeding her, all while maintaining perfect posture before the court. "Well, isn't this precious?" Judge Thompson remarked sarcastically, "playing house in my courtroom." Emma felt her mother tense beside her. Maria started to stand, but Emma gently touched her arm, silently telling her it was okay. The young girl had grown used to adults underestimating her over the past few months. "Your Honor," Mr. Jenkins began explaining, "the circumstances of this case are rather unique. Ms. Martinez has been diagnosed with a severe autoimmune condition that has left her temporarily." "I'm not interested in excuses, Counselor," Judge Thompson interrupted. "What I see is a clear case of neglect. A 12-year-old playing mother while the actual parent is incapable of providing proper care." He peered down at Emma over his glasses. "Young lady, don't you think you should be playing with dolls instead of carrying around a real baby?" The courtroom fell silent except for Sophia's content suckling sounds as she finished her bottle. Emma gently moved her sister to her shoulder, patting her back with a practiced touch. She looked directly at Judge Thompson, her brown eyes meeting his gray ones without flinching. The judge's mocking smile faded slightly as he noticed something unexpected in the young girl's gaze, not fear or intimidation, but a quiet determination that seemed far beyond her years. Emma's hands remained steady as she held her sister, even though her heart was pounding so hard she thought everyone must be able to hear it. The social worker assigned to their case, Ms. Peterson, sat in the front row, frantically flipping through her notes. She hadn't expected the hearing to take this turn so quickly. The tension in the room grew thicker as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Little did Judge Thompson know, the young girl standing before him was about to change not only his perspective, but the entire course of the hearing in ways no one could have predicted. 3 months earlier, on a sunny spring morning, Emma sat at their small kitchen table, carefully spooning oatmeal into Sophia's eager mouth. The baby's chubby cheeks were already spotted with breakfast, but she kept opening her mouth like a baby bird, wanting more. Their mother Maria watched from the doorway, leaning heavily against the frame, her usually bright eyes dulled with exhaustion and pain. "Mammy, you should sit down," Emma said, noticing how her mother's hands trembled as she tried to make herself a cup of tea. Maria had been getting worse over the past few weeks. What started as occasional joint pain had turned into days where she could barely get out of bed. "I'm fine, mi amor," Maria insisted, but her shaking hands betrayed her words as she dropped the spoon with a clatter. Emma quickly wiped Sophia's face, settled her in the high chair with a toy, and rushed to help her mother. The change in their family had come suddenly. Just 6 months after Sophia's birth, Maria started experiencing strange symptoms: severe joint pain, extreme fatigue, and mysterious fevers that came and went. The doctors at the free clinic had run tests, finally diagnosing her with a severe autoimmune condition that was attacking her body. Emma remembered the day everything changed clearly. She had come home from school to find their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, cradling a crying Sophia in the hallway. Maria had collapsed while doing laundry and had been taken to the hospital by ambulance. That night, while sitting in the cold hospital waiting room with Sophia sleeping in her arms, Emma made a silent promise to keep their family together, no matter what. The following weeks turned into a crash course in baby care for Emma. She learned to prepare bottles, change diapers, and interpret Sophia's different cries. During her lunch breaks at school, she would read baby development books in the library, taking careful notes in a small notebook she carried everywhere. Her teachers began to notice changes in the once carefree student. Emma started arriving at school early to complete homework she couldn't finish at home. Dark circles appeared under her eyes, but her assignments were always turned in on time. Ms. Rodriguez, her favorite teacher, started leaving granola bars on Emma's desk, pretending not to notice when the girl slipped them into her backpack for later. "Emma, sweetheart," Maria said one evening, watching her daughter juggle homework while feeding Sophia, "I'm so sorry you have to do all this." "Don't be sorry, Mommy," Emma replied, not looking up from her math problems. "You took care of me when I was little. Now it's my turn to help." She had developed a system, holding the bottle with one hand while solving equations with the other, pausing only to burp Sophia or check her diaper. Their neighbor Mrs. Chen helped when she could, watching Sophia during school hours. The kind woman had become like a grandmother to them, teaching Emma how to make rice porridge for Sophia when she started eating solid foods and showing her the best way to soothe a teething baby with gentle gum massages. But their careful routine began to unravel when Maria's condition worsened, requiring more frequent hospital stays. The hospital bills piled up, and their small savings dwindled. Emma started selling her old toys and books at school during lunch, carefully hiding the money in an envelope labeled emergency fund. One day, while Emma was walking Sophia in her stroller through their apartment complex, she overheard a neighbor talking on the phone about them. "There's a little girl taking care of a baby all by herself," the woman was saying. "Someone should call child services before something terrible happens." Emma's heart had stopped for a moment. That night, she stayed up late organizing all of Sophia's medical records, her school attendance reports, and the detailed care journal she had been keeping. She knew someone would eventually question their situation, and she needed to be ready. What Emma didn't know then was that the neighbor had indeed made that call. As she sat in the courtroom now, facing Judge Thompson's scrutiny, all those months of preparation were about to be put to the test. The careful notes, the sleepless nights, and every moment she had spent learning to be both sister and caregiver were leading to this crucial moment. The day everything fell apart started like any other. Emma was preparing Sophia's morning bottle when there was a knock at their apartment door. Her mother was having one of her bad days, barely able to move from the pain that seemed to consume her entire body. Standing at the door were two people, a stern-looking woman in a navy blue suit who introduced herself as Ms. Thompson from Child Protective Services, and a police officer whose badge read Officer Rivera. Emma's hand tightened around the warm bottle she was holding as her heart began to race. "We received a report about the welfare of an infant in this residence," Ms. Thompson stated, her eyes scanning the apartment behind Emma. "Is your mother home?" Before Emma could answer, Sophia's cry echoed from the bedroom. Years later, Emma would remember how Ms. Thompson's eyebrows shot up at the sound, and how quickly she pushed past her into the apartment. "Mammy isn't feeling well today," Emma explained, trying to keep her voice steady. "She's resting in her room. I can wake her if you need to talk to her." She followed the social worker, who was already making her way toward the crying. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Miss Thompson found Maria in bed, barely conscious with a high fever, Officer Rivera called for an ambulance while Miss Thompson discovered Emma's carefully organized baby care notebook, filled with feeding schedules and diaper changes in her childish handwriting. "How long has this been going on?" Miss Thompson demanded, flipping through the pages. "How long have you been the primary caregiver for your sister?" Emma stood her ground, Sophia now quiet in her arms as she took the bottle. "I help Mammy when she needs it. We're doing fine. Sophia is healthy and happy, see." She gestured to her sister's chubby cheeks and bright eyes. But Miss Thompson wasn't listening anymore. She was on her phone, speaking in quick, hushed tones about immediate removal and emergency placement. The words made Emma's blood run cold. At the hospital, things got worse. The doctors admitted Maria for severe complications from her condition. Emma sat in the waiting room, refusing to let go of Sophia despite the social worker's attempts to convince her. "Your mother will be hospitalized for at least a week," Miss Thompson explained, her voice softer now but still firm. "We need to place both you and your sister in temporary foster care." "No." Emma's voice echoed through the hospital corridor, causing several heads to turn. "We can't be separated. Sophia needs me. She won't understand if I'm not there." Mrs. Chen arrived at the hospital, having heard the commotion in their building earlier. She offered to take both girls, but was told she wasn't an approved foster parent. Emma watched helplessly as more officials arrived, more papers were signed, and more discussions happened over her head. That night, in a stranger's house, Emma lay awake in an unfamiliar bed. For the first time in months, she couldn't hear Sophia's gentle breathing from her crib. The foster mother, Mrs. Baker, had seemed kind enough, but Sophia was across town in a different home, probably confused and scared. Emma pulled out her phone, the one thing she had refused to let them take, and looked at the photos she had taken that morning of Sophia smiling during breakfast. Her sister's first tooth had just started showing, and Emma had been so excited to document it in her care journal. She thought about all the paperwork spread across their kitchen table at home. Doctors' reports showing Sophia's perfect health, growth charts tracking her development, even notes from Mrs. Chen vouching for Emma's capabilities. There had to be a way to show everyone that keeping them together was the right thing to do. As she lay there in the dark, Emma made a decision. She would fight the system with everything she had. She would show Judge Thompson and everyone else that love and responsibility weren't about age. They were about dedication and commitment. What Emma didn't realize was that her biggest challenge was yet to come. In just a few days, she would stand in that courtroom, facing a judge who thought she was just playing house. But Emma Martinez was about to prove that sometimes the smallest voices speak the loudest truths. Emma spent her first night in the foster home organizing her evidence. While other kids in Mrs. Baker's house watched TV downstairs, she sat cross-legged on her temporary bed, spreading out papers in neat piles around her. Mrs. Baker had brought her a sandwich, concerned that the young girl hadn't come down for dinner, but Emma barely touched it. Her backpack, which she grabbed before leaving their apartment, contained everything she thought might help. Sophia's vaccination records, growth charts, and the notebook where she documented every detail of her sister's care. She also had her own report cards, showing straight A's despite everything happening at home. "What are you doing up here all alone?" Mrs. Baker asked, standing in the doorway with a concerned look on her face. Emma looked up from her papers. "I'm preparing for court," she replied, her voice carrying a determination that made Mrs. Baker pause. "I need to show them that Sophia and I belong together." Mrs. Baker sat on the edge of the bed, carefully avoiding the organized piles of documents. She picked up one of Emma's notebooks, reading the detailed schedule Emma had created. 6:00 a.m., prepare bottles for the day. 6:30 a.m., wake Sophia for first feeding. 7:00 a.m., morning diaper change and outfit change. "You did all this yourself?" Mrs. Baker asked softly. Emma nodded, pulling out another notebook. "This one has all of Sophia's doctor's appointments and what they said at each visit. See?" She pointed to notes about Sophia's weight gain and development milestones. "She's in the 90th percentile for height and weight. The doctor said she's perfectly healthy." That night, something changed in Mrs. Baker's perspective. She made some phone calls after Emma finally fell asleep, surrounded by her papers. The next morning, she drove Emma to school herself, stopping at the office supply store first to buy proper folders for organizing all the documents. At school, Emma's teachers noticed a difference in her too. Always a good student, she now approached each class with an intense focus. During lunch, instead of eating, she visited the school counselor, Mrs. Patterson. "I need your help," Emma explained, pulling out her folders. "Would you write a letter about my character? About how I never miss school and still get good grades, even with everything happening at home?" Mrs. Patterson listened as Emma explained their situation, watching this young girl who spoke with the clarity and purpose of someone 3 times her age. By the end of lunch, she hadn't just agreed to write a letter. She called the school principal, Emma's teachers, and even the school nurse, all of whom offered to provide statements. After school, Mrs. Baker took Emma to visit Sophia at her foster home. The baby's face lit up at the sight of her sister, and Emma fought back tears as she held her. The foster mother caring for Sophia, Mrs. Collins, had been keeping detailed notes of her own. "She cries for hours sometimes," Mrs. Collins admitted. "The only thing that calms her is when I play recordings of your voice that Mrs. Baker sent over." Emma used the visit to demonstrate her sister's routine, the specific way Sophia liked to be held during feeding, the songs that helped her fall asleep, even how to tell her different cries apart. Mrs. Collins watched in amazement as Emma calmed Sophia's fussy mood in minutes, using techniques she perfected over months of care. That evening, both foster mothers agreed to help Emma prepare for court. Mrs. Baker contacted Mr. Jenkins, their court-appointed lawyer, who was surprised to receive a thick folder of organized evidence from a 12-year-old client. "We need to show Judge Thompson that separating us would do more harm than good," Emma explained during their meeting. "Sophia needs consistency and familiar care. She needs her family." Mr. Jenkins studied the material Emma had gathered: medical records, school documents, character references, daily logs, and even photos showing Sophia's progress under her care. He'd never seen such thorough preparation from any client, let alone a child. As Emma lay in bed that night, she heard Mrs. Baker on the phone in the hallway, talking to someone about her case. "I've never seen anything like it," she was saying. "This girl isn't just playing at being responsible. She's more capable than most adults I know." Emma hugged her pillow, thinking of Sophia. Tomorrow would bring another day of preparation, another step closer to the hearing that would decide their fate. She was ready to show everyone that sometimes the best person for a job isn't the oldest or the most experienced, but the one who loves the most. Back in the present moment in courtroom 7, Judge Thompson's mocking words about playing house still hung in the air. Emma stood straight, her arms steady as she continued holding Sophia, who had fallen asleep after her bottle. "Your Honor," Emma spoke clearly, surprising everyone in the courtroom. "May I show you something?" Before the judge could respond, Emma carefully shifted Sophia to one arm and reached into her backpack with the other. She pulled out a thick blue binder, its edges worn from constant use. Mr. Jenkins quickly stepped forward to take it to the judge's bench. "What is this?" Judge Thompson asked, opening the binder with obvious skepticism. "That's my sister's life, Your Honor," Emma replied. "Every bottle, every diaper change, every doctor's visit, every milestone. I've documented everything since my mother got sick." The judge began flipping through the pages, his expression changing from dismissive to curious. Each page was neatly organized, with dates, times, and detailed notes. There were growth charts, feeding schedules, and even Sophia's sleep patterns tracked in careful handwriting. "You did all this?" he asked, looking up at Emma over his reading glasses. "Yes, sir. Page 32 shows when Sophia got her first tooth. Page 45 has her vaccination records. She's never missed a shot. Pages 50 through 63 are letters from our pediatrician confirming she's hitting all her developmental milestones." The social worker, Miss Peterson, stood up from her seat. "Your Honor, while this is impressive, it doesn't change the fact that a 12-year-old shouldn't be responsible for an infant." Emma turned to face Miss Peterson. "Would you like to see Sophia's daily schedule? It's on page 15. I wake up at 5 a.m. to prepare her bottles for the day. At 6 a.m., I get her ready while our neighbor Mrs. Chen makes breakfast. I'm never late for school because I plan everything the night before." Judge Thompson held up his hand. "Young lady, do you understand why we're concerned? Childhood is a time for—" "For what, Your Honor?" Emma interrupted, her voice trembling slightly. "For playing with friends? I have straight A's in school. For watching TV? I read books about child development during lunch break. For being carefree? I learned to be responsible because my sister needed me. The courtroom fell silent. Even Sophia seemed to sense the importance of the moment, staying peacefully asleep in her sister's arms. Emma continued, her voice growing stronger. I know you think I'm just playing house, but look at page 72. Those are Sophia's growth charts. She's in the 90th percentile for height and weight. Page 85 is notes from her last checkup. The doctor said she's one of the healthiest babies he's seen. Judge Thompson was now fully engaged, carefully reading each page Emma referenced. His earlier mocking smile had disappeared completely. Your Honor, Mr. Jenkins interjected. We also have statements from Emma's teachers, the school counselor, and their neighbor Mrs. Chen, who helps supervise when Emma's in school. Emma gently rocked Sophia as she spoke again. I'm not asking to be her mother, Your Honor. I have a mother who loves us very much. She's getting better with treatment, but right now, she needs help. All I'm asking is to keep our family together while she recovers. The judge removed his glasses, rubbing his eyes. The courtroom remained silent as he studied Emma, who stood firm under his gaze. Finally, he spoke, his tone notably different from before. Miss Peterson, he addressed the social worker, have you reviewed these records? No, Your Honor, she admitted. I wasn't aware of their existence. Well, Judge Thompson said, holding up the binder, I suggest you do. This is the most detailed care log I've seen in 20 years on the bench. He turned back to Emma. Young lady, I believe you have more to tell us about your situation. Emma nodded, knowing this was her moment. She had prepared for this, rehearsed it countless times in Mrs. Baker's spare bedroom. As she began to speak again, she could feel the atmosphere in the courtroom shifting. Judge Thompson was no longer looking at her as a child playing pretend, but as someone who deserved to be heard. The most important part of her fight was about to begin. Emma took a deep breath, adjusting Sophia in her arms as she prepared to tell their story. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the courthouse windows, casting a warm glow across the room. Your Honor, she began, her voice clear and steady. Every morning at 5 a.m., while the world is still dark and quiet, I wake up to the sound of my alarm. Not because I want to, but because Sophia needs her first bottle by 5:30. She's very punctual about breakfast, Emma added, causing a few soft chuckles in the courtroom. Judge Thompson leaned forward, his earlier skepticism replaced by genuine interest. Continue, he encouraged. By 6 a.m., I've changed her diaper and dressed her for the day. Mrs. Chen from apartment 4B comes over at 6:30. She's been like a grandmother to us since Mammy got sick. She watches Sophia during school hours and taught me how to make rice porridge when Sophia started eating solid foods. Emma paused as Sophia stirred slightly, automatically patting her back in a practice motion. I get to school by 7:45 every morning. During lunch break, I call Mrs. Chen to check on Sophia. My teachers let me use the classroom phone because they know it's important. And your schoolwork? The judge inquired, glancing at her academic records. I do my homework between Sophia's afternoon nap and evening bottle. Sometimes it means staying up late, but I've maintained my grades. My teachers have been very understanding. Ms. Rodriguez even stays after school, sometimes to help me with math when I miss things because of doctor appointments. Emma shifted her weight, but her voice remained steady. I know what you're thinking, Your Honor. You're thinking that a 12-year-old shouldn't have to live like this. Maybe you're right, but when my mother got sick, we had two choices: let the system separate us, or find a way to make it work. She gestured to the binder on his desk. Every page in that notebook represents a day we stayed together as a family. Every feeding logged, every diaper changed, every smile and new word documented. They're all proof that love doesn't have an age requirement. The courtroom remained silent as Emma continued. I learned to tell Sophia's cries apart. A high-pitched cry means she's hungry. A whimpering cry means she needs a diaper change. A frustrated cry means she's tired but fighting sleep. I learned all this because I had to, because she needed me to. Tears formed in Emma's eyes, but she blinked them away. My mother, she's getting better. The doctors say her treatment is working. But right now, she needs help, and Sophia needs consistency. Separating us won't solve anything. It will only create new problems. Judge Thompson was now fully engaged, his earlier dismissive attitude completely gone. And what about your own childhood, Emma? Don't you miss having time to just be a kid? Emma looked down at her sleeping sister, a small smile crossing her face. Your Honor, I still am a kid. I do my homework. I watch cartoons with Sophia on Saturday mornings. I text my friends and talk about music. The only difference is that I also know how to warm a bottle and change a diaper. She looked directly at the judge, but more importantly, I know what responsibility means. I know what it means to put someone else's needs before my own. Isn't that something adults want children to learn? The social worker, Ms. Peterson, had stopped taking notes, her pen frozen mid-sentence as she listened. Even the court reporter seemed moved, her fingers pausing briefly on her stenotype machine. My mother taught me that family takes care of family. Emma's voice grew stronger. She worked 2 jobs when I was little to give me a better life. Now it's my turn to help her. We're not asking for much, just a chance to stay together while she recovers. Sophia needs her family. She needs her mother's love, and yes, she needs her sister's care too. Emma fell silent, her piece said. The quiet in the courtroom was profound, broken only by Sophia's soft breathing. Judge Thompson sat back in his chair, studying the young girl before him. The mockery from earlier had vanished from his face, replaced by something that looked remarkably like respect. The next words he would speak would determine the fate of the Martinez family, and everyone in the courtroom seemed to hold their breath, waiting. Judge Thompson removed his glasses, rubbing his eyes as he processed everything he had just heard. The courtroom remained silent, waiting for his response. Before he could speak, there was a commotion at the back of the courtroom. Dr. Sarah Chen, Emma's mother's physician, hurried through the doors, still wearing her hospital scrubs. Behind her came Mrs. Chen, their neighbor, carrying a thick folder of her own. Mr. Jenkins quickly approached them, speaking in hushed tones. Your Honor, Mr. Jenkins addressed the court. We have 2 additional witnesses who would like to speak on behalf of the Martinez family. The judge nodded, his attention caught by the unexpected arrivals. Dr. Chen approached the bench first, her professional demeanor commanding attention. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, Maria Martinez's primary physician, she began. I left my rounds at the hospital because I felt it was crucial to be here today. She pulled out medical charts and handed them to the bailiff. These are Mrs. Martinez's latest test results. Her condition is improving significantly with the new treatment protocol. Judge Thompson studied the charts carefully as Dr. Chen continued. What's remarkable about this case, Your Honor, is not just Maria's medical progress, but the role her daughter Emma played in it. Emma has attended every medical appointment, taking detailed notes, and ensuring all medications are administered correctly. The doctor turned to look at Emma, who still stood straight, holding Sophia. In 20 years of practice, I've never seen such dedication. Emma created a color-coded system to track her mother's medications, symptoms, and appointments. She even noticed a pattern in her mother's symptoms that helped us adjust the treatment plan. Mrs. Chen stepped forward next, her small frame barely visible behind the podium. Your Honor, I've lived next door to the Martinez family for 3 years. I watch Sophia during school hours, but I want to be clear, Emma is not neglecting her childhood. She's demonstrating the kind of responsibility and compassion many adults struggle to achieve. The elderly woman's voice grew stronger as she spoke. I see her playing with Sophia, singing songs, teaching her words in both English and Spanish. She helps other children in the building with their homework. She organizes small reading groups where she reads stories to the younger children, including Sophia. As if on cue, Sophia woke up and smiled at Mrs. Chen, reaching out her tiny hands. The genuine affection between them was evident to everyone in the courtroom. Miss Peterson, the social worker, stood up. Your Honor, if I may. At the judge's nod, she continued, after reviewing the evidence presented today and these new testimonies, I would like to revise my recommendation. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Miss Peterson pulled out a new form from her briefcase. While the situation is unconventional, it's clear that the Martinez family has created a stable and nurturing environment for both children. Breaking up this family would do more harm than good. Judge Thompson leaned back in his chair, looking thoughtfully at the scene before him. Emma still stood tall, despite having held Sophia for over an hour. The baby was content in her sister's arms, playing quietly with Emma's necklace, a small locket that contained a picture of their mother. Young lady, the judge addressed Emma, his tone completely different from earlier, when you first walked into my courtroom, I made assumptions based on your age. I was wrong." Emma's eyes widened slightly, but she remained quiet, waiting for him to continue. "Dr. Chen," the judge turned to the physician, "how long until Mrs. Martinez is expected to fully recover?" "With the current treatment plan, we expect significant improvement within 3 to 4 months, Your Honor. She's already showing remarkable progress." Judge Thompson nodded, making notes on his pad. He looked at each person in the courtroom. Emma standing strong with Sophia, Dr. Chen with her medical evidence, Mrs. Chen with her testimony of daily life, and Ms. Peterson with her revised recommendation. The afternoon sun had shifted, casting long shadows across the courtroom floor. The moment felt heavy with possibility as Judge Thompson prepared to deliver his decision. Emma held her breath, instinctively holding Sophia a little closer. Everything they had fought for came down to this moment. The judge cleared his throat, ready to announce his verdict that would change the Martinez family's life forever. And Judge Thompson's voice filled the courtroom with unexpected warmth as he delivered his decision. "In all my years on the bench," he began, "I've learned that sometimes the most remarkable wisdom comes from the most unexpected sources." He closed the blue binder containing Emma's meticulous notes and looked directly at her. "Emma Martinez, when you walked into my courtroom today, I saw what I wanted to see. A child playing at being an adult. I was wrong, and I owe you an apology." Sophia chose that moment to let out a happy gurgle, causing gentle laughter to ripple through the courtroom. Emma adjusted her sister with the practiced ease that had so impressed everyone throughout the hearing. After reviewing all the evidence, hearing the testimonies, and most importantly, witnessing the extraordinary bond between these sisters, this court makes the following ruling. Judge Thompson sat up straighter, his voice taking on its official tone. "First, the Martinez family will remain together, with certain support systems in place. Ms. Peterson," he turned to the social worker, "I want your office to arrange for a part-time home health aide to assist Mrs. Martinez during her recovery period." Emma's shoulders relaxed slightly, but she maintained her composure as the judge continued. "Second, Mrs. Chen will be officially registered as an approved emergency caregiver for both children, with all necessary documentation expedited." He smiled at the elderly neighbor who had proved to be such a crucial part of their support system. "Third," he turned to Dr. Chen, "I want monthly updates on Mrs. Martinez's progress, submitted directly to this court. Emma has set a high standard for documentation. I expect the medical reports to be just as thorough." The judge then addressed Emma directly. "Young lady, while your dedication to your family is admirable, I want to ensure you also have the chance to be 12. Therefore, I'm ordering the implementation of a support program." He outlined his plan. A local family support organization would provide after-school assistance 3 days a week, giving Emma time for homework and extracurricular activities. The court would arrange for a tutor to help her catch up on any schoolwork she had missed. Additionally, a counseling service would be available to all family members to help them navigate their unique situation. "Your Honor," Emma spoke up, her voice steady, "thank you for understanding that keeping us together was the right thing to do." Judge Thompson smiled, a genuine warm smile that transformed his entire face. "Emma, you've taught this court a valuable lesson today. Family isn't just about age or conventional roles. It's about love, dedication, and the willingness to step up when needed." He made one final note in his papers. "This court will review the situation in 3 months, by which time," he looked at Dr. Chen, "we hope to hear good news about Mrs. Martinez's recovery." As the judge prepared to close the proceedings, Mr. Jenkins stepped forward with one last request. "Your Honor, given the exceptional circumstances, would the court consider expunging the initial CPS report from the record? It would ensure this temporary situation doesn't create future complications for the family." Judge Thompson didn't hesitate. "Granted. Let the record show that this family has demonstrated extraordinary resilience and capability in the face of challenging circumstances." With a bang of his gavel, the hearing was over. The courtroom erupted in quiet congratulations. Mrs. Chen hugged Emma carefully, mindful of Sophia in her arms. Dr. Chen promised to visit Maria in the hospital right away with the good news. As they prepared to leave the courtroom, Judge Thompson called out one last time, "Emma." She turned back to face him. "That detailed notebook of yours, Would you consider sharing your organization system with our family court? It could help other families in similar situations." Emma smiled, her first full smile since entering the courtroom. "Of course, Your Honor. I'd be happy to help." Outside the courthouse, the afternoon sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in beautiful shades of orange and pink. Emma stood on the steps, holding Sophia close, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of their victory. Her sister's warm weight in her arms felt like the most natural thing in the world. Mrs. Chen touched her shoulder gently. "Come, dear, let's go tell your mother the good news." As they walked to the car, Emma knew that while their journey wasn't over, they would face whatever came next together as a family. Sometimes, she realized, the strongest families were the ones that didn't fit the usual mold, but were bound together by love, determination, and the courage to stand up for what's right.